Welcome to Entrepreneurial Reality with Bash. Every week we'll be speaking to startup and scale-up founders to learn about them, their ambitions for the business, goals and objectives. Every conversation is a moment in time, documenting entrepreneurs' current situation with a view to coming back next year to see how they are getting on. Each journey will be different. Each innovation could be game-changing. I hope you enjoy. Welcome to Entrepreneurial Reality with Bash, Season 1, Episode 14, and I have Dominic O'Meara with me, founder of Baagloo, a social media application built around community and charity. So welcome, Dominic.
Thanks very much, Ben. Great to be here.
Thank you for your time. So for the benefit of the listeners, could you give a little bit of background?
Yeah, well, you asked the question earlier, how did I get here? How did I come to be, an entrepreneur, really? How do I get here in terms of entrepreneurship? And I had a little, thinking about that. I mean, my dad had his own business. I grew up in that environment with the goal of working for myself, really for as long as I can remember. I mean, from the word go, that was what I was going to do. The question really, the bit to be filled in was doing what? And very early on, I wanted to work in advertising from about 15. I remember it very clearly from about 15 and quite possibly even earlier. I mean, I remember going to watch a movie in a little village where I grew up just outside Stratford-on-Avon, Ben, where you might well be, I think when you're talking to me from there right now. And there's a little village called Wellesbourne, and we didn't have a cinema, probably still isn't a cinema, I shouldn't think. And in the village hall, a movie was being shown. And my older brother took me to see this movie. And I don't remember the movie. I think it might have been Chitty Chitty Bang Bang. I don't really remember the movie. But I do remember the commercials that were played before, which were for PG Tips with the chimps. And we all thought they were absolutely a riot. I think I was about 4. And I was given a little box of tea bags to take home, which I gave to my mother. And that was an interaction with advertising, Unilever's PG Tips at the age of 4. And it had a big impression, made a big impression on people, bigger than the movie that I'd been to see. And of course, there you've got a number of different things going on that we now call experiential advertising, don't we? We've made up all sorts of names for things over the years. But, I was given these tea bags. It was a big influence on me. I saw the ads and that, advertising played a great part in my consciousness from that moment on. So I became, an entrepreneur in advertising and started my own ad agency. I went through school, went on to do a business degree, lucky enough to be sponsored. And I think my sponsorship really caught the attention of Saatchi & Saatchi, who I joined as a graduate. And I worked on some very top accounts with them and then worked with some great ad agencies after that. Around BP's campaign globally, making commercials with George Lucas Studios, winning a BAFTA for them. So I had a terrific career. And then I moved to Amsterdam because I was hankering to start my own agency, and I was told that this just couldn't happen in London. They weren't very encouraging. I don't think they really wanted people to start their own agencies. They didn't fancy the competition. So I went to Amsterdam, which is much more entrepreneur friendly for advertising. And you don't have to have an office with, massive glass windows and lots of chrome and lots of expensive people wandering around on expensive cars parked outside in Amsterdam. You can do it in your own front room. And so that's what I did. First off, I set up an office for a company called Naked, which was a very successful media agency in the sort of earlier part of the noughties. And then I started my own ad agency called Community with Canon and TDK as our first clients. We won pitches in the first 2 weeks to win those pieces of business, and we were profitable from day one. Community, very successful, 5 years followed. We got to 25 people, $5 million in annual fees. And I could see the media landscape was really shifting away from the agency model. I could see the rise of social media, the impact that was having, pretty much the only game in town. And, reading the pages of Campaign or Brand Republic, it was what everyone obsessed about. So I figured, well, in charge of your own destiny, I'm going to focus on this. And so we decided to put our focus actually on owning and developing a communications channel within this new social environment rather than just making content for or buying space on one for clients. So that's what we did. And that's how Baagloo came about. initially, as an idea, I had to help Canon and Adidas with their in-store marketing, actually. So two clients that I'd been working with for some years out of community. And I went to them as I could see this whole landscape changing. We were making a lot of content for them, and budgets for content were being more and more restricted. So I went to them with an idea to get more out of their in-store marketing using QR codes on point of sale to bring mobile-based messages, product movies, offers, onto the mobile phone, because we built a little scanner with a guy that I'd been working with as our IT manager for years out of community. I knew him very well, Richard Lustenberg, and he'd also been, I didn't know this, but he'd started working in mobile a couple of years before this. I had no idea because, mobile was still so new. So he was able to develop a QR code scanner, because I looked into buying one, but back then they were very expensive. So anyway, we built our own. And we scanned QR codes, and the QR codes on posters, in camera shops or in Adidas stores, took you to mobile-ready sites and product movies and offers and news that we built the content for. And the package we called Baagloo, because it was bridging the online and the offline worlds, bringing them together in the hands of people on their mobile phones. And clients loved it. I mean, they thought it was a great idea. And so we started to evolve it, really, with Canon and Adidas, and also, others came on board. We did some work with Philips, with Eastpak, with a few companies, actually, Samsung. They all seemed to, really like it. I could see that, the growth area is always going to be in the media. As I say, we wanted to develop a media channel, and for that, you need eyeballs. I mean, you need to grow the audience. And that's what we set about doing. So several iterations then began to develop the product, bringing us up to the present day, really. And the proposition we have now, which is that it's the social media that gives back, and we exist to share the millions generated in social media advertising with the millions who need it most.
Could you just tell us a bit more around the structure? Is it a bit like a Facebook? Is it a bit like a Twitter or an Instagram?
It's recognizable from that sort of format. I mean, it is, at its core, it's a social media. So users post content to the glue board, as we call it. That's our feed. You post your content to the glue board, and you can post about pretty much anything you want, just as you would with the other social media. But our emphasis is on this concept of sharing advertising wealth. So the kind of audience that we're attracting is, it tends to be a more ethically motivated kind of an audience. And so their interests are more in the area of sustainability, of issues that they want to help try and resolve. But there's no legislation that you have to do that. So you post whatever you want to post about, just as you would with any other social network. And the key difference is that when your posts are viewed, you earn Barcoin. And Barcoin is our internal token. Of course, it's our little skit on Bitcoin. But you earn Barcoin, and these are fully exchangeable, fully fiat exchangeable. And you donate the Barcoin that you've earned for views of your posts to the charities, good causes, and initiatives that you want to support. So that's how we share it. And that share of the value of your view is actually a share in the advertising revenue that your views are helping to generate. Because, of course, when people use Facebook or Twitter or any of the social media, most of them are advertising revenue driven. Certainly Facebook is, and it's really views of your posts that drives the traffic that makes the money for these social networks. So we've developed software that will track that and give you a share of it that you can then share with charities and good causes. So it's a completely altruistic motive. You don't actually get to keep any of the money yourself. Well, first off, we're not, you get a slightly more spammy kind of content when you do that. And the other thing is that we're not, in the end, talking about a fortune per person. There was a website that tried this, actually. There have been a couple. And the thing is that unless you have, if the average normal user of Facebook doesn't generate a fortune for Facebook, it's just there are so many users that they generate overall a fortune, if you see what I mean. It's something like about $25, $30 annually is the average. Now, there are certain heavy users that will be generating several $100s, and there are less frequent users that will just be generating a smaller amount. But if you add all of those together, then and you channel that money into charities and good causes, then you have potentially a serious lot of money that can end up being redistributed, to good causes and charities. I mean, were our model to be adopted by Facebook, for example, I hesitate to put a figure on it. If their advertising revenue was 40 billion last year, which I gather it would, then they would be generating about 20 billion a year for charities and good causes, were they to use our model, which I very much doubt they would. We're using our model, and we'll still be perfectly profitable even after we've shared the vast majority of the money that comes through the network with charities and good causes.
I'm trying to understand a bit more about how you generate the advertising revenue in the first place. Because with the likes of Facebook, they take a fee to allow individuals and companies to publish an advertisement in a feed that is then consumed by a user. So they read through their feed, they see the advert. That's been paid for. Mm-hmm. Is that the same premise that you're talking about?
Yeah. It's terribly simple. It's as simple as you dare allow yourself to believe it is, Ben. It couldn't be more simple. So think of the simplest answer that there could possibly be to this conundrum, and you'll probably be right. It is simply that we have developed software that tracks how many views of your post, that you receive, and calculates the value of those views in the advertising that you've helped generate. Allocates that into an account stored in the form of Barcoin that you can then pay to any of the charities and good causes that we're in partnership with. And it all comes off the back of, views of ads. We work on the basis that, as you go into our app, you are going to see ads and brand messages. Not necessarily ads, because we don't want our app dripping with display ads. You might see posts from our sponsors. And I should say that our model is more sponsorship driven than advertising relationship driven. We're taking a rather different approach to traditional social media. You're asking about problems that we've encountered and things that I would advise. And one of the problems we encountered was trying to make programmatic advertising work. It just doesn't, at least it didn't for us. And I know that this is the case for many, many other publishers or networks before they get to what's called scale. And, people's definition of scale seems to vary, from one person to the next. Some people say it's 1 million users plus, and others claim other numbers. In the end, we just decided, look, enough of all this. We're going to go direct to the advertisers and build a relationship with them. This is quite a new direction for us. So all I can say is that because our proposition is very much pointed towards the ethically responsive user, we have a growing number of advertisers whose attention we've caught because of this, including the biggest purpose-led brand advertiser on the planet and in the world. So these are the sort of developments that are going on right now.
Okay, great.
And more than that, I cannot say.
So with regards to building the audience, you mentioned eyeballs is the way to drive advertising, and
it's what it's all
their
about.
Attention.
Whichever age you're in, that's always been the case.
How many sort of users do you have at the moment, and what is your ambition for the next year?
So the metric we're more concerned with is numbers of views, really. Number of views that we've so far reached is 15 million monthly views or monthly impressions. And what we're looking to do is to grow rapidly now to our next sort of target level is 100 million monthly impressions. In terms of numbers of users, that would probably be coming off about 250,000 users. So very early days for us with this new format. Our target, though, would be to take a share of market of the ethically motivated users of social media. If you look at all social media, if you look at the total number of views that are delivered by the total number of users, because the numbers of users there are about 2.5 billion. They're probably pretty much the same people, though. It's not like there's 2.5 billion for Facebook and another billion for Instagram and another 300 million for Twitter. They're all pretty much the same people, right? So if we look at numbers of views, then it gives you some idea of the total usage rather than necessarily the number of users. Do you see what I mean?
Yes. Yeah.
So that's why we're a bit more interested in usage. We are looking as a target further down the track to arrive at a 10% share of the total available sustainable market, which is to say about 10 billion monthly views.
That's significant. Per view, do you have an amount of money or Barcoin that gets attributed per view?
It depends. And it depends on a couple of factors. We, Baagloo, as a company, as I say, the relationship is a sponsored relationship. So what we have is within that sponsorship, we have a package of things that we do. We plan the media. We prepare the content where necessary, and bear in mind that we are not advocating for our advertisers, and also bear in mind my background's in advertising,
Mm-hmm.
career's been in advertising. My experience is that advertising works at its best when people don't feel they're being advertised to, and therefore I'm not a big fan of display advertising. I mean, it's okay, it has its place, but I wouldn't recommend it. I'm not necessarily a big fan of standardized format advertising. And so consequently, I won't recommend to advertisers that they just plonk loads of display ads into the app. Instead, what I would recommend them to do is, have an amount of display advertising, but quite a lot of, native communication going on in there. So posts, stories. I mean, a company like Unilever, for example, has lots of actual real life examples that they can tell their audience about. For example, the work they do with LifePoint, specifically in Kenya, although they do it all over the world, but in Kenya, where they're encouraging people to wash their hands because, washing your hands helps you avoid various, diseases, dysentery, these sort of things. And they work very hard to spread that message. What we would do is, place stories, help the brand to communicate what they're doing, but on a level that isn't strictly, a display advertising type of approach. There are other brands that seem to bolster their sustainability credentials. IKEA is another one. Lego is another one. There are many brands really connect with their audience on that level and don't necessarily want to do it through anything as clunky as display advertising. So the medium becomes the message, and simply being on Baagloo is a way of saying, if you're a brand, look, I want to work with people who want to make a difference. Because when we advertise on Baagloo, a significant amount of the advertising money is going to help good causes and charities, including those with whom we are directly associated. Because most of the big brands out there these days, and even smaller brands, have charitable relationships that can find their way, that then become part of our partnership.
Right. So for the benefits of someone like me who will be using the app, posting and sharing, and over time gathering Barcoin to then push to a charity of my choosing, or is there a selection of charities that you recommend?
There's a selection of recommended charities where if you don't see one on there that takes your fancy, then you can always ask that we add it and that we approach them and add it. But we're looking to build we're looking to build a bigger and bigger database, if you like, of charities and good causes that are connected with pretty much every issue. I mean, there's so many charities. I think there's something like 250,000 registered charities in this country alone. So, many of them just don't get any kind of airtime or get heard about. So we'd like to try and help support those that are lesser known. But really our thing is about trying to enable our users to take action, within whatever area it is they want to take action. It could be environmental, or it could be more social. It could be to do with, plastic in the seas. It could be to do with homelessness in certain parts of the country, or disadvantage, or a lack of education. It could be something to do with, the underdeveloped world. It could be, about a shortage of food and housing anywhere on Earth. I mean, because one of the questions you asked is it's a good question, which is what problem are you looking to solve? I mean, we should come back to that one. And the problem we're looking to solve is global wealth inequality, in a nutshell. That's it. That's what Baagloo exists to do, to help try and redress that balance. And I think I earlier gave you the sort of level on scale on which we could bring that about using social media as the channel. It's surprising to me how little it's being used, and our determination is to change that. We want to change. We want to change the world for for better. And we feel I've spent my life in advertising. I don't know how to do it through any other means. I only know advertising, and this is the way to do it, as far as I can see. You can use social media to do it, and that's why I started one.
It's a very noble cause, and compliment you on the work that you've done so far.
Well, that's very kind. Thank you.
How are you going to build the community up further? So with your knowledge of advertising, could you give any tips or recommendations of how you're going about doing that to other entrepreneurs that are looking to do a similar sort of thing for their business?
Well, the trial that we did, that I've referenced to, I'll be honest with you, we put it out there and just saw what it would do. and it got a pretty much viral uptake, and we reached 15 million monthly impressions, which is a figure far, far higher than I was expecting to get to. I was expecting to get to something more like 1 million monthly impressions. So 15 million monthly impressions was a really positive thing from our point of view. As far as, validation is the word, isn't it? Of our ability to handle traffic rapidly and the broad concept that we put in front of people. And that concept has significantly improved, certainly in terms of its appeal to advertisers, by becoming more altruistic. And it's also moved rather upscale in terms of the profile of user that we're attracting, which again is attractive to advertisers because they tend to prefer more affluent users. Use Facebook advertising, by the way, which is very, very, very expensive, of course. But we did use it because you can reach absolutely the same reason everybody uses it, which is that you can reach everyone with it. The problem is that so long as there is only Facebook, you're not getting much of a you're not getting much contrast. So that's another reason that the world needs an alternative. But with our plans, we are not going that way at all. I mean, we just simply did that in order to get some downloads quickly to see what then happened. We paid a lot of money for the few downloads that we got through Facebook. But what happened, it wasn't a few, for the downloads we got through Facebook. But what happened from that was that, user invited user. And so we saw a very rapid uptake off the back of that. And we just hit a particular chord, I guess, with a particular user base. And we got rapid uptake. Within about 12 weeks, we went from, practically naught to 15 million monthly impressions. So that was pretty quick.
That is quick. So here and now, you've got the application. You're building out your sponsor list.
Yes.
Who are focused on sustainability, charitable causes.
Yes, that's
for good.
Certainly an important part of their message. Yeah.
So they want to be associated with that, and also access the customers, the potential customers that have the same focus and mentality. In 12 months' time, you talked about building the number of impressions that you're making.
Yes.
You talked about how you've received investment and now you've got the technology ready to scale.
Yes.
So it's just a matter of going out there and building that community further.
Exactly that. And the way we're going to go about that is, as our sponsors come on, of course, being, we're in a position with sort of like the social media giants are just not in the position to work very closely with the sponsors, to help shape their campaigns, and to a degree, the technology that we're building around messaging and how we serve that up to users. So as we do that, we're also going to big, icons of the charity world. I mean, sort of like Leonardo DiCaprio would be an example of, a seriously big icon, but you're probably aware he has the Leonardo DiCaprio Foundation. So that's like 35 million followers on Twitter. And he's just a fairly extreme example of others who we are approaching to become, part of what we're doing. And that's one channel through which we're looking to, to develop our user base. So, I mean, they will, tweet out to their users or speak to followers, and tell them to find them on Baagloo, where they'll be talking about their interests, be that cleaning up the ocean or whatever it is. And as they do so, the advertising revenues that surround their content, which they do on Twitter and they do on Facebook, but they don't see any of it. Will go to supporting the charities and good causes that they are actively involved in. Do you see? So the motivation for them is to help further the causes that they are working to support. So
Very interesting.
That's one way. And then similarly with charities, of course, because some of these charities have enormous following, supports and subscribers. Cancer research, for instance, has well over 1 million, but I mean significantly over it. It's in their interests that all of their users should use Baagloo rather than Facebook, from whom, again, they get nothing.
Fantastic. Exciting times ahead.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So let's talk a bit more about you yourself, the individual.
Okay.
So in terms of building businesses, you've always wanted to be an entrepreneur. You are an entrepreneur. You're living the life of one.
Right.
So is there anybody else that you look look up to or take motivation from?
Yeah,
from what they're
well, I
doing?
mean, too many to mention, I suppose. Almost too many to mention. I mean, I mentioned to you earlier. I mean, I started at Saatchi, and I think that was a hugely entrepreneurial environment to cut my teeth in. I mean, that everybody there was a bit of an entrepreneur. Really, the whole spirit was entrepreneurial. I've just always really been around very entrepreneurially minded people, I think. Probably birds of a feather sort of flock together. Today, I work with people that are very inspiring, entrepreneurially minded people. I suppose it's just the company that you tend to keep, isn't it, really?
That's a good piece of advice, actually, because it is motivating you. You're able to bounce ideas. You see what other people are doing, and then you're focusing on building your own business, your own output.
And this is why places like WeWork and these working environments have been so successful. Actually, I don't work out of a WeWork or anything like that these days. I did when I started Community. And WeWorks didn't even exist back then, but I started working out of a communal place in Amsterdam called WD81. And this is before WeWork and communal centres were commonplace or, thought of, really. So it's a great thing to do. Definitely get yourself into one of those. I'm not. Actually, because circumstances slightly changed for me, but I can certainly recommend. I do think it's a smart move early on if you're starting to be an entrepreneur, especially if you're one or two man band, is to get around more body heat, more people, because that will definitely spur you on, and you'll bounce ideas to everything you just said, really.
And as you're busy building a business, you're building an application, you're taking it to market, you're selling the idea, you're bringing in sponsors. That takes a lot of time.
Yeah.
So is there any way in which you create headspace to recalibrate?
Yeah, I mean, I'm a massive addict for running. I run quite a lot. And I find that is a huge therapy, since you ask. I kind of need it, and I run as often as I can. I'm looking at some hills right now thinking, I'd love to go and run in there. So I find running is a massively cathartic thing. And I took it up pretty much as I started Community, actually. So pretty much from the get-go of being an entrepreneur, of having my own business, that's gone hand in hand with running. Since you asked, yeah, those two things have really go together. I run 3 or 4 times a week.
That's good. Healthy body, healthy mind.
Yeah,
a healthy business.
Right. Well, it's certainly I mean, I run for the mental side of it. The physical part is just a very, very handy byproduct. But I actually run because I can't actually sit and meditate, but I can run and think. I don't listen to music or anything else. I just think to myself, and I find it is a very, very handy way to de-stress. How about you, Ben? What do you do to chill out? What do you do?
So there's a whole host of things. I vary from playing computer games. There's a first-person shooters. There's some strategy games as well that I like playing, where there's a continual movement of pieces on the board, essentially.
Yeah.
And you have to make decisions very quickly on the fly.
Right.
But also I do Tang Sudo, a Korean-style karate, and that set of movements is a form of meditation that I see.
Okay.
And I've been doing that for a long time, but it's just making sure that you have the discipline to do it regularly. That's very important.
Tricky, huh? Yeah.
And I do love hiking. I love going across the hills and mountains. Again, like you, clearing your head, thinking about things, and taking in the fresh air. As an entrepreneur, you're continually learning. A lot of people do this by just doing and failing fast, falling forwards and getting up quickly and trying something different. So that's the primary way of learning, is by doing. There is then understanding the experiences of other people, like this podcast, to learn about what other people have done. Are there any sort of materials that you are reviewing at the moment, and from any particular individual that you could recommend, such as reading, such as podcasts, such as videos?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to, I mean, I do tend to read an awful lot of sources, data, articles, pieces that are either very directly or more indirectly related to the business that I'm building. So, fairly major consumer of, I mean, LinkedIn I use quite a bit these days, and I find that quite a good source of material. There's, Method. There's an economist whose book I can recommend, a guy called Professor Fred Harrison. He's the author of Boom Bust, and I think he's quite an interesting economist because he predicted the 80s crash, and he also predicted, in his book Boom Bust, he predicted the global economic crisis of 2008, 2009. And he wrote that book I read it in 2005, and I sort of planned my business development a little bit in the light of what I was reading. I certainly bore it in mind, because the argument he presented, actually around the property market, but markets in general, was pretty strong, I felt, and he was proven right again. So I think he's quite an apocryphal economist, in my opinion, to take note of. So Professor Fred Harrison. Yeah, and I'm reading Robert Graves at the moment, Goodbye to All That, which is just, the autobiography of Robert Graves, who's an interesting character, I think, because he went off to fight in the First World War. And this year I've been very conscious of that whole event, because it's the centenary of the end of the First World War, which is such a dreadful thing, I think. It's an awful, awful thing to happen to so many young men, in particular, in this country. And I'd like to know more about it and how life was for people at that time.
Based on your journey to date, what would you do differently knowing what you know now?
I can't complain too much, I think, and I'm not sure that I would have. I mean, you can only do what you do. You can only do what seems to be the best at the time. Let me think about. Let me see. What would I do if having said that? What's a more useful thing? Because you have to try things out, and you won't learn unless you do try. However, I know what you mean. I think I wouldn't if I'd known now if I'd known then what I know now about programmatic. Although I had my distinct feelings about it, I didn't like the look of it. I didn't trust it actually at the time. I thought, this looks like it could be a lot of hocus pocus. My experience it was exactly that. So I would have simply avoided programmatic advertising altogether, and continue with my plan, which was just to really build up a very good audience and go and get a sponsor right from the start. That's what I was always going to do.
Thank you so much for your time. And
absolute pleasure.
And I wish you all the best with your endeavours over the next 12 months.
Thank you so
much. We'll keep in touch over the course of those 12 months. If there's any sort of news piece, I'll follow. And I'll be publishing that and to the listeners as well, saying, have you heard what Dominic at Baagloo has done recently? Things like that will raise the attention.
That's terrific. That's really, really exciting thrilled to be part of it, excited to be part of it. And thank you very much for involving me, and to your listeners for listening. And God bless you all. Best wishes to you all.
Thank you.
Good luck with everything you're doing.
So what do you think? We'll have another interesting story to dive into next week. Looking forward to it already. Some questions to you in the meantime. What is your story? What is your reality right now? And what are you working towards? Let me know. So you can connect with me on Twitter. Just type in Bash in the search and you'll find me. So Bash, B-A-S-H. Easy. On Instagram, it's Bash Reality. So that's Bash_reality. And on LinkedIn, Benjamin Ashmore. Make sure you subscribe, and until next week, cheers.
The podcast you just heard was made using Anchor. Ever thought about making your own podcast? Anchor makes it really easy for anyone to get started. It's a one-stop shop for recording, hosting, and distributing podcasts. Best of all, it's 100% free. Sign up now at anchor.fm/new. That's anchor.fm/new to get started.